All right, great. Now we're ready to move on to the next step called shaping. Everything up to this point has pretty much been prep, and this is where it gets really cool, where we really get into the first step of actual retouching, of really manipulating the pixels. We're going to use the Liquify tool, which is a really great tool for manipulating the shape of your object. We can go right into it. We can use one tool and start pushing the pixels around in real time to create a nice streamlined image. First, what I'm going to do, because I've got these 3 layers here, I know I want to use these in some capacity because they have, these different lighting situations in them. So I don't really want to think about that right now. I want to think about that later, but I want to set myself up for success to be able to do that. Like I said, this is the system. We want to just think one step, next step, and not convolute our thinking or attention with creative type stuff. Now we just want to set this up perfectly. So what I'm going to do is combine all 3 of these layers into a smart object, so later I can go in and mess with them, but I can still do my first Liquify step right now. I'm going to double click on this background layer to set it to a new name, layer 0. I'm going to combine all of these into a group by selecting them all and hitting Command G and right clicking, convert to smart object. So now I've got all these combined into one smart object that I can apply my Liquify to as a smart filter. And you always want to do this when we go into Liquify. When you're going into Liquify, always try to do that on a smart object because that remains infinitely editable because it's a smart filter. I'll show you how that works. You can enter Liquify by going Command-Shift-X, and basically the only tool that I care about in this process, I mean, the others are great, but the forward warp tool is usually all I need to get all the work done that I need to do for shaping. So this tool, get used to it, get comfortable with it. It's pretty basic. It works pretty much the same way that the brush does in Photoshop. It has the same controls. You can use the same modifier keys to change the size, but somehow the implementation of that in Liquify just isn't as good as in as when you're back in Photoshop. That's a nice fluid way to change your brush size and density. In here, I kind of like to use the bracket keys to change the size. It just works better. You can see these settings. I don't even mess with my settings very much. This is the nice thing about Liquify is you just kind of hit the ground running with it, and you can just push pixels around. It's magic. It's a fantastic tool, and it really does a great job of preserving the quality of the pixels that you pushed around. I mean, that was really extreme what I did just then. So you see this, you see a little bit of warping of the pixels, but that's still surprisingly good in terms of maintaining the fidelity. I don't know what kind of math goes on in Liquify, but I'm always so grateful that we have a tool that is so powerful like this. So what I'm going to do is just start looking for areas where the lines aren't straight, basically. Think of it like that. I just want to straighten things out and go through, start maybe more at the micro level, a little bit closer, and then move out to the more bird's eye view and adjust the bigger things. Because once you get the little warbles worked out in the lines, then you can move on to the bigger stuff, and you can make bigger changes to the architecture of the object that you're working on. So it's actually pretty straightforward. I'm just trying to create nice curves and nice lines. You can pay attention to how I change the brush size in order to target larger or smaller changes in the lines. I often on shoes, if you find yourself working on shoes, I almost always tend to smudge down the laces a bit. It just creates a nicer silhouette. This shoe is actually really good already, but I can do a little bit to tuck those in. Just because this line, you want lines to read in a more smooth and directional manner when you're working on objects that are associated with performance or speed or something like that, let's say. I mean, I think that's the philosophy behind it, is engaging with that sort of story behind the object that you're working on and thinking of it in terms of that, because we're telling stories and communicating information to the viewer in the fastest way possible in advertising, because we want that just to read really fast. And part of streamlining an image like this is enhancing that communication, that speed of communication and efficiency of transferring story visually. That's my philosophy anyway. So just these small little variations in form, shape, and line. So we see along the edge here, there's a little bit of difference in the line that's created just by the nature of the light hitting the this kind of midsole area. So I'm going to try to, it's not even a change in the construction. It's sort of just a variation due to the cast shadow, but I'm still going to try to shift that into a more uniform line. You can see we're still working pretty micro here. And a cool, quick way to see before and after is just to hit P. That can be gratifying if you've moved on and you're working really close, just to step back and just see what you've done to the image and how it's improving. And this is part of why I like really working in a systematic way, because, I can see all these imperfections in the shoe right now. I can see the glue on the sole. I don't even care about that right now. All I'm focusing on is streamlining the shape and not worrying about anything else until I come to it, because that reliance on the system allows you to really efficiently focus on the task at hand and not be distracted by things that are going to happen later in the process. Yeah, so as I'm working here, you see that I'm not just going around the outside of the object and working on the silhouette. I'm going into every area. And, you can do this as systematically as you want to. You could go left to right, back and forth, following every line. And that can actually be helpful if you have that sort of linear process worked into your workflow. And that's something that you'll develop with time and practice. But thinking in terms of that is a good way to start your practice of figuring out what your workflow is. Because if you do things in a linear and systematic fashion, you're less likely to miss things rather than going around the whole image. Just like targeting one area, then another, then another. Yeah, and like I said before about that issue of not having to think ahead at this stage is the nice thing is right now I don't have to think about this really horrible specular highlight that's on the sole, because that's going to make my life hell later, but I don't have to think about that right now. So this might seem like really, really micro obsessive changes, and it is. But the thing to remember, and this is sort of a recurring theme in retouching in general, is that all of these tiny little moves that you do within this system all add up to such a major transformation at the end. And just relying on the steps that you do at each, just relying within the steps that you do at each stage, that the process always works at the end, and the final product is the culmination of all these tiny little things you do. So it's really important to step back because you want to see this process happening and not just experience it. But if I go back and forth, you can see how I've just really basically made, a 5% increase in the quality of this image, in the sort of polished nature of the image. So we keep stacking those 5% on top of each other through this process. That's when we come out with this big transformation at the end. Keeping in mind that larger scale of progress happening over time within these small little obsessive steps is really important in order for you to feel like you're moving forward always and building on top of the previous step. So I think I'm pretty good with the micro work right now. And stepping back, I think that this line overall, this midsole, just in the middle here, maybe it gets a little bit wonky. So I'm going to increase my brush and see if I can make some improvements there. Just make that line maybe swoop a little bit better. Still, even on the macro level, these are not major moves. And always the thing with shaping, whether you're working on people or shoes, products, whatever, you're going to always want to respect the integrity of the initial image. And I mean, it kind of goes without saying, you don't want to manipulate something so much that it becomes like not a authentic representation of what the product or the person looks like. That's really important to keep in mind. Okay, great. I think this is a pretty big improvement, going back and forth, before, after. That's really all I want to do with this shoe. It's already in really good shape. Sometimes you'll find products that through the manufacturing process, there are a lot of things that have shifted or bunched up or something like that you need to fix. But this shoe's pretty good already, but we did make a good improvement in an already nicely constructed object. So I'm just going to hit enter and commit to that. But I'm not committing fully. The nice thing is, you'll see here it's a smart filter. So if I want to go back in and change something, I just double click on Liquify and it brings me right back in with all my changes still in there, still dynamic, still editable. And that's the wonderful thing about smart objects and Liquify. So now that I have this object all nice and streamlined, I know I'm not going to really do any more major changes to the initial shape right now. And the next step we can move into is isolation and clipping.